Drive safe. Turn right. Get ready to turn right. Turn right. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. You have arrived at your destination. Your route guidance is now finished. Ready to roll.
there's another attack by Israel on Iran that then leads the Houthis in Yemen to fire missiles, one of which, for the sake of conversation, hits an American naval vessel. Before you know it, the Americans are attacking Iran. That is something both the U.S. wants to avoid, one of those forever wars in the Middle East, and that is not something the Iranians want at this point. But the nature of the beast called escalation is that you think you know how it would unfold, but you don't really.
Picture. Alon Pincus, a former diplomat in Israel and now a columnist for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Elsa.
At 6:18, you're listening to All Things Considered on News 88.7.
Thousands of dollars for Houston Public Media today. When we reach 200 donations by midnight, a group of Affinity Council members will release an additional $35,000 in funding for this station. Your support powers local stories and balanced news for all of Greater Houston. Today is the last day to join the Unlock Challenge and make a difference. Your gift brings us one step closer. Give right now at HoustonPublicMedia.org.
Hour number 2 of Sly and the Family Stone, Taking Us Home. More about the great groundbreaking group of the late 1960s and early 1970s.
You know, it's a shame that his life took the turn it took, because who knows what incredible music he would have made.
That's hour number 2 of Sly and the Family Stone, Taking Us Higher, right here real soon. Saturday evening at 7 on News 88.7.
Support comes from Houston Grand Opera, with subscription packages available for the upcoming season at the Wortham Center, featuring Il Trovatore, Cinderella, and more. Subscriber info is at HoustonGrandOpera.com.
Support also comes from members like you from ElectricityPlans.com, helping homes and businesses with electricity plans based on usage and tools to find a plan that fits their needs. Enrollment details and more at ElectricityPlans.com. From the Eternal Gandhi Museum, dedicated to education, preservation, and promotion of Mahatma Gandhi's legacy through stories of how nonviolence can inspire civil rights, freedom, and social justice movements. Tickets at egmh.org. And from Asia Society, Texas, presenting an evening with MSNBC host Ali Velshi with his new book, Small Acts of Courage, Legacy of Endurance and the Fight for Democracy. It's on Tuesday, August 6th. Tickets at asiasociety.com/Texas. It's 6:20.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Visit St. Pete, Clearwater, Florida, where fall color seekers can find miles of sugary white sand beaches and emerald green Gulf waters, as well as fiery red, orange, and yellow sunsets. More at visitspc.com. And from BritBox, dedicated to helping people discover British crime series, including new seasons of Silent Witness, Blue Lights, and The Responder starring Morgan Freeman. Streaming at BritBox.com/NPR. This is NPR.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. At Howard University in the 1980s, many students arrived on campus with an intense feeling of purpose.
We were highly focused on the impact that we could have. We were the first generation to have the opportunities provided by not being born into legal segregation.
Jill Lewis, class of '87, says in those days students at the historically black university actually dressed up to go to school, including her sorority sister, Kamala Harris. Lewis joined Alpha Kappa Alpha her junior year at the same time Harris was joining her senior year.
Kamala carried a briefcase, and that was not deemed to be an odd thing.
An undergraduate with a briefcase.
She would not be alone, and it would not be deemed to be odd, because we were about our business, the business of achieving that education and being able to move forward.
Lewis is now an attorney in Dallas, and her sorority sister is the vice president, who also has the shortest presidential campaign runway in modern U.S. history, while the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, has been in the national spotlight for decades. So all week we've been talking with people about Harris's life before she became a senator in a series called I Knew Her When. Harris's racial identity is in the spotlight this week after Trump falsely said Harris only recently started to identify as black. I spoke with Lewis before Trump made those remarks, and she told me, as a college student, Harris often joined protests against apartheid rule in South Africa.
She was very active. She didn't lead them. She wasn't one of the people sort of standing on the podium, but we all participated in the ways that we could, some just by becoming educated in it, and some by actually going down to the embassy and protesting.
I'm curious, within any protest, there are going to be the people who politely stand with a sign and the people who, I don't know, fire a paintball gun or something like that. Which end of the spectrum was she on?
We are, let's politely hold a sign and have our message, because she is always about the rule of law. We weren't there to be disruptive or defacing or to be outside the bounds of expressing our constitutional rights. And we had parents who would say, we didn't send you there to get arrested. We sent you there to get your education.
And so having come from a Berkeley neighborhood that included families of many cultures and then moved to Montreal, where she was one of few non-white students at her high school, what was her life like in this black mecca of Howard University?
She fit right in, because you have to realize that we're not a monolith either. We are a diaspora. You meet people today who come from an East Indian background who say, oh, my father went to Howard. He studied engineering there, studied medicine there. People who were members of the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities who came from all over the world and were not necessarily a part of the exact descendants of those who had been African Americans on American soil. So she fit right in.
Keep left.
I read an article that said she would hang out at a spot called the Punch Out.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Okay, so the Punch Out was an amazing place of gathering. So you go into the main student center, you go downstairs, so it has a little bit of a pub quality, and you go in, and around the walls at that time were all the shields of the sororities and fraternities. And so you would typically go and sit near one of those if you were a member, because all of the people would then congregate, so you could feel a sense of belonging immediately.
No, but I heard that you could tell the cool kids from the less cool kids by whether they ate at the Punch Out or in the cafeteria.
I never stepped foot in the cafeteria.
So you were a cool kid.
I guess I was really a kid who rebelled against all things cafeteria, because after 12 years of education from 1st through 12th, I just thought the cafeterias were pretty gross. But the Punch Out was fun.
So if the Punch Out was a place where people did stand-up comedy or DJ sets or whatever it was, what was Kamala Harris doing there?
She was a Kappa Sweetheart. And so what I will tell you that Kappa Sweethearts did while we were there is we would go sit among the group that were part of that fraternity and part of the organization, and people would collect, and we would laugh and tell stories and just really enjoy the fellowship of being college students.
What was sorority life with her like? What did she tend to do for the sorority?
So she graduated shortly after we were initiated, so we only had kind of our last few months on campus where we would put together service projects and things like that.
Do you remember a specific service project she organized?
So when you say she organized, I think we sort of organized those as a group. So I can speak to, oh my God, this one was during the time that we were initiates, but we were charged with being able to put these kinds of programs together. And so literally on like 24 to 48 hours notice, they said, oh, we've actually arranged for you all to go and put on a presentation at a local retirement home. And we expect it to be excellent, because that's what we expect. And when you show up at 8 a.m. tomorrow, please be ready to demonstrate.
And how'd it go?
And it was midnight. It went spectacularly.
What'd she do?
So I think she was in the group because we had kind of a singing aspect. And the other thing, it was important to do things as a group. And this, I think, is telling, because this tells you a little bit about who she is, in that 38 people, all different talents. I don't think we have a whole lot of shrinking violets even among the 38. One of the philosophies is you're only as good as the worst one. And so making sure not that you shine to outshine others, but that you're actually lifting the performance of the entire group. So there's actually no benefit to saying, well, you know, I'm the best and I can carry the best tune, but at the same time supporting the talents of others. And I see that today.
I have to ask, is she a good singer?
She can carry a tune.
That's a little equivocal there.
She can carry a tune.
So if I were to ask you to think back to that class of 38 young women at Howard University, all inducted into the sorority your year, and pick one of the 38 who was most likely to run for president, would you have chosen her?
Not necessarily.
Go on.
And I say that because I have various friends who've said, there may be about like 5 of you, we would include her, but I think it was perhaps our vision was too limited at that time. And we did not understand everything that would be open to us. And I so compliment her for having a vision bigger than anything that any of us had ever seen.
Well, Jill Lewis, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, certainly. Thank you.
She is an attorney in Dallas, and our series I Knew Her When was produced by Janaki Mehta and Mark Rivers. It was edited by Ashley Brown and Patrick Jaranwatanana. Special thanks to KQED's Molly Solomon and NPR's Deepa Shivaram. You can hear all 5 conversations at npr.org.
At 6:29, you've been listening to All Things Considered on your NPR station, News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Porter Law Firm, helping with business investments, real estate transactions, construction matters, and planning for the next generation. More at porterfirm.com. Real investment.
Support also comes from members like you from Houston Community College, with 8 areas of study offering students 280 degree plans and career choices, online or in person. Sign up information at more at hccs.edu. From Comcast Business, partnering with companies to help keep their business moving by offering a network of cybersecurity solutions and round-the-clock support, powering possibilities, restrictions apply. ComcastBusiness.com. And from Downtown Houston Plus, keeping the pulse of everything under the downtown skyline, from skyscrapers to sidewalks, parks, trails, and destinations, plus information on what to do and how to get around. More information at downtownhouston.org.
Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager, designed to empower travelers who need access to secure logins from any device and any place. Available to download at bitwarden.com.
Well, the market sure didn't like that jobs report, but how worried should we be? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Crowley, a logistics, energy, and maritime solutions company with nearly 135 years of innovation and a commitment to sustainability. Learn more at crowley.com. And by OneStream, the enterprise finance platform that unifies financial and operational data using the power of AI, helping businesses forecast faster and more accurately at onestream.com.
In Baltimore, I'm Amy Scott, in for Kai Rizdal. It's Friday, August 2nd. Good to have you with us. Has the Fed waited too long to cut interest rates? That's the question looming over the markets today after the Labor Department said job creation slowed sharply in July. Employers added 114,000 jobs, down from an average pace in the past year of 215,000. And the unemployment
month, it showed that the unemployment rate rose for the fourth straight month. And the concern is that because the Fed has not started pulling back its policy stance from this restrictive place where it is, that they could be behind the curve and really open up the labor market to a much more severe and broad slowdown than what we've seen so far.
Right, and both of you were at that press conference with the Fed chair. Gina, you asked Chair Powell when the Fed opted not to cut rates, basically why wait? Do you think this jobs report suggests maybe they shouldn't have waited?
I think they're going to get that question a lot more in the coming days in light of this jobs report. I think we're clearly at this moment where, Mike Froley, I think thought, who is the chief U.S. economist at J.P. Morgan, I thought put it really well in his note. And he basically said, in hindsight, it seems obvious that not going in July was a mistake. It also seems obvious that they're going to be cutting rates very soon. And I think that that's really the takeaway here. They didn't move in July. Probably had they known this data was coming, they would have preferred that they had. But I think now, this just very much cements the case for that September cut. And it's actually making a lot of people in markets question whether they might do a supersized cut when it comes to the September meeting. They're going a little late, so maybe they'll go a little bit more aggressively.
Right. But, Amara, this is just one report, and Powell did take pains this week to say that the Fed is data dependent, but not data point dependent. It's looking at the totality. We did have some other data this week. How is that totality shaping up?
I think the totality of the data is showing that things are clearly slowing down. Whether you look at manufacturing data, some spending data, all of those things show that things are cooling off from the red hot levels where they were earlier in the pandemic recovery. But you're right that Chair Powell has really emphasized the fact that that Fed officials are thinking about sort of the balance of their responsibilities very carefully, right? So they're not only going to be looking at what's happening in the labor market, they're also going to be looking at inflation data. They're going to be considering all the things. And you saw Austin Goolsbee, the president of the Chicago Fed, come out and say, you never want to overreact to any one number. And so I think you're going to see Fed officials continuing to emphasize that they are considering a lot of things as they figure out sort of not only when to cut rates, but sort of what the pace, the size, and the cadence of cuts should be.
Yeah, so Gina, you did talk about some growing consensus that maybe we'll see a larger cut in September than we might have. But if it turns out the Fed did wait too long and we'll have another jobs report before that September meeting, how hard is it to get back ahead of the curve, or has that ship sailed?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. I think the real concern with unemployment is, as economists will tell you, shoots up like a rocket, comes down like a feather. So when it moves up, it tends to move up very quickly, and it tends to kind of get some momentum. And so I think that's why economists are so concerned, and that's why you've seen the market move so much today, is people are taking the fact that the unemployment rate has risen quite a bit over the last year, but really notably this month, and saying, we might be at that tipping point, we might be at that moment where unemployment starts to really shoot up, and if it has enough momentum, if the job market is slowing and that's feeding on itself, the Fed might struggle to really quickly arrest that, because Fed policy does work with somewhat of a lag. And so I think that's the real concern here. I think it's obviously an open question, but it's got to be the thing that Fed officials are worried about today.
And if you're watching the bond market, you've seen that yields are already falling. They're down well below 4% for the first time in months. And Powell also talked about this, that markets move in advance of the Fed. And so I'm wondering if that's the case and the market's already pricing in a September
different time, right? Like we're in a post-pandemic place. A lot of the trends that led to the inflationary surge that we saw were really specific to the pandemic. A lot of the normalizing we're seeing now is related to things from the pandemic unwinding, employers sort of finding a new balance after the pandemic. And so she's warned that perhaps historical rules don't necessarily apply in the situation that we find ourselves in now.
So when I asked how worried should we be, maybe not too worried yet.
I mean, I think that...
Go ahead, yeah.
No, I think economists that I spoke to today are talking about the downside risks, right? They don't say that the labor market is falling off a cliff. The question is what's going to come in the next couple of months, and what is the Fed going to do to ensure that we don't?
All right, Amara Amokwe is at Bloomberg. Gina Smilik is at the New York Times. Thank you both so much, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On Wall Street, well, I already spoiled that one. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. Among the 114,000 jobs employers did add last month, the health sector again led the way with 55,000 jobs. Construction added 25,000, hospitality 23,000. One of the biggest losers last month, though, was the information sector. That includes data processors, software publishers, movie producers, and, yes, broadcasters. Information employment fell by 20,000 jobs in July. Marketplace's Kaylee Wells has more on what's going on.
There's a short-term answer and a long-term answer. The long-term answer is pretty straightforward, says economics professor Tara Sinclair at the George Washington University. She says the job loss isn't surprising because that's been the trend in the information sector for decades.
It's now quite a bit lower than it was. It actually peaked in the 1940s.
There aren't switchboard operators and scribes like there once were, and computers can do a lot of the data analyzing we used to do ourselves. Sinclair says information sector jobs in the 1940s accounted for 4% of jobs. Now it's half that, at just 2%.
I don't know how much further down as a share of the labor market it could go. So if you wanted to have some good news, maybe it's going to level off here.
But the short-term picture is unclear. Josh Hurt says the decline in information sector jobs last month is a big deal. He's a senior U.S. economist at Vanguard.
This is actually a pretty meaningful deterioration from previous months where we had been, sort of much more neutral.
It could just be a bad month. After all, other indicators suggest the labor market in tech and entertainment isn't struggling as much as it might seem.
With information specifically, the wage gains have actually been quite good. So it is something that doesn't necessarily align with us seeing broad weakness in that sector.
But Hugh J. Martin is worried that there's even more weakness to come. He's professor emeritus at Ohio University's E.W. Scripps School of Journalism and says now a major player could gobble up even more jobs.
Artificial intelligence, which is clearly an enormous threat
to all kinds of jobs in entertainment, communications, media, and Martin expects the demand for AI in the information sector to increase.
If you have a journalistic job writing someone said something on the internet stories, I think your job's going to go away first.
But he says original reporting like that on, say, a public radio economic show, not that I asked out of personal interest or anything, he says those jobs will likely stick around. I'm Kaylee Wells for Marketplace.
Already, but stick with us because we're going back in time to a story about one job in the age before
1993, I had a pager, and it was important that my customers could reach me, so I would literally have to stop the car, find a payphone, look at the number on the pager, call them back. You know, my first mobile phone was a huge suitcase that I would put in the seat next to me and plug into my cigarette lighter in the car, which even cars don't even have those anymore. Other iterations of the cell phone, I had one with an antenna that I had to pull out of the body of the phone. And eventually my favorite was actually my BlackBerry. I loved my BlackBerry, got very fast with typing with the little keyboard, and almost had to pry it out of my hands when I had to give that up for the iPhone. I mean, it made a huge difference when I could actually have a mobile device in my car, even though it was as big as a suitcase. It still meant that I didn't have to stop the car, go find a payphone. One of my customers was the Washington State ferries, and I could even get on the ferry finally and have communication from the ferry, which was amazing. Now, of course, everything is mobile. I had a Zoom call the other day with my boss from the parking lot of a Costco. So now I can be reached anywhere, anytime. And really the advancements in mobile communication have moved business at speeds we never even imagined in the 90s.
That was Christina Azab in San Diego, California. You can write to us about your analog job at marketplace.org/myanaloglife. Coming up, I didn't really realize the difference in languages at home and school. That's a useful skill. But first, let's do the numbers. Ooh, like I said, not too pleased with that job report. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 610 points, 1.5%, to finish at 39,737. The NASDAQ subtracted 417 points, 2.4% to close at 16,776. And the S&P 500 lost 100 points, more than 1.8%, to end at 53.46. For the week, the Dow retreated 2.1%, the NASDAQ declined 3.1%, and the S&P 500 weakened almost 2.1%. The bad news started after the bell yesterday when Amazon.com reported that consumers don't seem to feel like doing as much consuming as they have been, even though the company reported profits and cloud computing revenues that beat expectations. Amazon gave back just shy of 8.8% today. Bonds rose, as I said. The yield on the 10-year T-note fell to 3.79%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business, aiming to help save time by offering smart business buying solutions, so there's more time to focus on growing the business and less time doing the admin. More at AmazonBusiness.com. And by Odoo, management software designed to unite every aspect of business into one simple platform. Odoo aims to take businesses to the next level. ODOO.com. Everything any business will ever need. And by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to raising awareness and accelerating action on America's fiscal challenges to build a brighter economic future for the next generation. Learn more at pgpf.org.
647, you're listening to News 88.
PBS NewsHour.
Now, more than ever, you need news you can trust.
PBS NewsHour.
Unbiased, in-depth news that delivers substance over sensationalism.
PBS NewsHour.
Cutting through the noise with news that matters. World-class journalism that brings unrivaled national and global perspective home to you.
PBS
the diversion of container ships from the Red Sea to avoid attacks, plus a rush of early orders and bad weather combined to double or triple prices. Those rates have eased slightly in the past few weeks, according to maritime research firm Drewry. And a bunch of new ships coming online should help in the longer term. Marketplace's Sabri Benishore has that story.
Remember when we ordered so much stuff during COVID that it helped break global supply chains? Ships were lined up at ports, nothing arrived on time, shipping rates jumped 8-fold. Well, that was kind of a good time to be in the shipping industry. The ocean shipping lines make more money than they ever have. Tim DeNoyer is a senior analyst at ACT Research. In 2022, shipping giant Maersk brought in $81.5 billion, more revenue than in any year ever. Its net income went from around $5 billion in 2019 to nearly $31 billion in 2022. Across the industry, those profits were put to work.
The ocean carriers have huge order books of new ships.
Ryan Peterson is CEO of logistics company Flexport.
And those were placed during the COVID boom years where they made so much money. They reinvested that in new ships and new cargo capacity.
Rerouting.
More ships that take 2.5 years to build. Meanwhile, the boom years turned into bust years for the freight industry. After 2022, consumers moved on from binging on patio furniture and new TVs. Retailers had too much stuff lying around, so they stopped ordering so much. According to data from Freightos, the cost of shipping a container crashed from a peak of $11,000 down to a low of just about $1,000 towards the end of last year. Profits sank too. People called it the Great Freight Recession. The container ship orders, though, they were still there. Ships still being built.
And those ships are being delivered every week. We have new ships coming online from the world's shipbuilders.
A record amount of shipping capacity was added in 2023. And as these ships started sailing, it seemed like the world was getting way more ships than it needed, says John Paul Rodrigue, professor of maritime business administration at Texas A&M Galveston.
But now with the Panama issue, with the Suez issue, this oversupply was captured, was accommodated.
The Panama Canal lowered its water levels this spring because of a drought. Ships had to offload cargo to make it through. The war in Gaza has spilled into the Red Sea, so shippers are avoiding the Suez Canal. Retailers all rushed to get holiday orders shipped early to avoid trouble later. And suddenly, all those new ships were not enough. International trade needed more ships and more time. The weighted average cost of shipping a 40-foot container went from $1,400 at the beginning of the year to nearly $6,000 now, according to maritime consultancy Drewry. The question for shippers is how long will this last?
If this is a long-term situation, they might decide, yes, we need extra capacity.
Container ship owner Danaus Corporation recently announced it's ordered 5 new container ships due in 2027 and 2028. Meanwhile, other ships ordered years ago are still coming online, adding to supply, all while demand is an open question. So it looks like shipping rates will come down for 2025, and ocean freight in general may be headed for another bust year. And that, says Flexport's Peterson, is just kind of how the shipping industry is.
The ocean freight industry is inherently a boom and bust industry because the assets last for like 30 years. You know, you buy one of these ships and it's got a really long life cycle.
And it's hard to predict trade patterns over just 6 months, much less 30 years. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
I'll find a new one.
By 2060, the U.S. Census Bureau estimates 1 in 4 Americans will be Hispanic or Latino. And that means the need for Spanish language interpreters is likely to grow. Big cities in California, New York, and Texas are already hot spots for interpreters. But now there's a need in smaller, booming resort towns in the Mountain West, where Latinos are often a big part of the labor force. Working long hours in construction or hotel and restaurant jobs doesn't always allow time to learn English. Wyoming Public Radio's Hannah Merzbach reports.
Celia Perez has been going back and forth between English and Spanish since elementary school.
I didn't really realize the difference in languages at home and school.
Perez moved here to Victor, Idaho back in the 90s. It's a bedroom community for Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and is nestled in the Tetons. Perez was born in Mexico and raised in the U.S., and as a kid, she stepped in to interpret for her mom.
I noticed like she needed help at the store, or my dad needed help, with asking for something.
Now, Perez has a career as an interpreter. Her skills are especially needed in this resort community. The Census Bureau says the population is about 15% Hispanic, but local nonprofits say that's probably an underestimate.
We're such a diverse community now, so we have to be able to bridge that gap, or how are we going to be able to understand each other?
Language interpretation is still a small industry. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates there's about 50,000 interpreters and translators nationwide, mostly in big metro areas. But in the next decade, the industry is expected to grow by upwards of 20% in places like schools and healthcare offices, where interpreters are legally required. And that means more interpreters will need to be trained. So it's not only listening, it's active. Giovanna Cadillo Contreras leads a workshop for new interpreters in an air-conditioned conference room in Jackson Hole. She's training bilingual health workers, police officers, airline, and hotel staffers. She tells the class it's not enough to simply repeat the Spanish speaker words in English or vice versa.
We have to understand, process, analyze, learn, and deliver.
Interpretation is not just about what someone says, but how they say it. There's emotion or pauses, regional dialects, or idioms that Google Translate or AI might miss. And on top of that, at government meetings or public events, interpreters have to do on-the-spot translations simultaneously.
Honestly, that's very hard.
On this day, Blanca Moye is interpreting for a Jackson Hole meeting of a housing nonprofit. Moye sits in the back of the room, speaking Spanish into a small microphone during a presentation in English about affordable housing. A handful of Spanish speakers listen to Moye's interpretation through headsets. Moye says more organizations are making events accessible through interpreters. Still, this is a growing region and new people are moving in from all over.
It's not just Spanish. I think it's important to see the huge need because the population is growing and growing everywhere.
And she says the region should be ready for those newcomers too. In Jackson, Wyoming, I'm Hannah Mersbach for Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance with Snapshot. Learn more about Snapshot at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Snapshot not available in California or from all agents. And by Rubrik. When cyber attacks put businesses at risk, Rubrik provides the power to bounce back fast. More at Rubrik.com.
This final note on the way out today. Is it back to school shopping time already? CNET has a rundown of the sales tax holidays happening in many states this summer that could take the edge off for inflation-weary families. 9 states are offering tax-free shopping on school-related items this weekend, including Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, New Mexico, and South Carolina, with others coming later in August. The National Retail Federation says families with school-aged children plan to spend about $870 on supplies this year on average, down from last year's record of $890. Our theme music was composed by B.J. Liederman. Marketplace's executive producer is Nancy Fergali. Donna Tam is the executive editor. Neil Scarborough is the vice president and general manager. And I'm Amy Scott. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday. This is APN.
Main Street to Wall Street, Comcast Business provides business solutions ranging from cybersecurity solutions to round-the-clock partnership, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply.
We're in the final hours of our week-long Unlock Challenge. Between now and midnight, we need 200 members to give. And when you do, you'll help unlock $35,000 in funding for Houston Public Media. So give online between now and midnight at houstonpublicmedia.org. Sunset at 8:13, mostly clear overnight with a low of 78. Tomorrow's sunrise at 6:42. Tomorrow's weather exactly like today and the last several days before that. That heat advisory running until 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, and then Sunday and Monday up to a 30% chance of rain. Highs in the upper 70s. Right now it's 94 with the heat index of 109 here at your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
What we learned is that for many months in an obscure probate courthouse in Nevada, the Murdoch family has been battling it out for control not only of their family fortune, but for Rupert Murdoch's huge global media empire, this conservative media juggernaut that's best known for its crown jewel, Fox News.
I'm Sabrina Tavernisi. That's coming up on The Daily from The New York Times.
The Daily is supported by BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public. Go deeper into the day's most pressing stories with New York Times journalists, trusted sources, and the people affected. The Daily from The New York Times, distributed by American Public Media.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. Vice President Kamala Harris has secured enough votes from Democratic delegates to become the party's nominee for president. It comes as her 2-week-old campaign enters a crucial period next week, including announcing her running mate. Here's NPR's Don Gagne.
The Harris campaign has been riding a surge of support from Democrats. There have also been high-profile endorsements, most recently that of the United Auto Workers Union, which could be crucial in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Not coincidentally, those states are also on the list of places Vice President Harris will visit in a multi-state barnstorming tour next week, where she'll be joined by her as of yet unannounced partner on the Democratic ticket. That announcement of a running mate could come within days. Meanwhile, her campaign has just announced that in the Democratic Party's state-by-state virtual vote, she has surpassed the number of delegates needed to officially nominate her. Don Gagne, NPR News.
The political head of Hamas, the militant group at war with Israel in Gaza, was buried today after being killed in Tehran this week. It was in an attack blamed on Israel. In Beirut, hundreds of Hamas supporters marched in a symbolic procession to a cemetery. NPR's Jana Raff was there.
The 2 coffins they're carrying are symbolic, empty, because the commander and the other Hamas official killed in Tehran are being buried in Qatar.
Let's find a new route.
There are people waving all sorts of flags, Palestinian flags, flags of the Palestinian factions, almost every one of them, and a speaker saying, "Rest in peace. We will continue your struggle."
That's NPR's Jana Raff in Beirut. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says the U.S. plans to send a fighter jet squadron to the Middle East and will also keep an aircraft carrier in the region. Defense officials are worried about possible attacks by Iran following deadly strikes by Israel on Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. Kirby, appearing today on CNN, says as a result, the U.S. is taking threats from Iran seriously.
We've heard the Supreme Leader loud and clear that he intends to avenge this killing of a Hamas leader in Tehran, and that they want to conduct another attack on Israel. We can't just assume that we aren't also potentially going to be victims of that kind of an attack. So we got to make sure we got the right resources and capabilities in the region.
Pentagon officials also say they've ordered additional ballistic missile cruisers and destroyers to the European and Middle East regions. A rough end of the week on Wall Street, which suffered further whipsawing today after a July jobs report alarmed some investors. The Fed may have held off too long in cutting interest rates. The Dow fell 610 points. The Nasdaq dropped 417 points today. You're listening to NPR. The Biden administration has temporarily halted a humanitarian program that's allowed nearly 500,000 people from Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Haiti to live and work or seek asylum in the U.S. The program has been suspended amidst concerns about fraud. NPR's Jasmine Guards reports.
In order to enter the U.S. with this 2-year humanitarian parole program, a person must have a sponsor in the U.S. and pass security, background, and health checks. Up to 30,000 new applicants are allowed each month. The Department of Homeland Security did not specify what led to the pause, but critics have been raising the alarm over possible fraud, including people paying thousands of dollars to get their approval moved up in the program and using false sponsor information. Advocates lamented that this comes as Venezuela and Haiti are in the throes of violent political turmoil. Homeland Security has said it will restart the application process as quickly as possible with safeguards. Jasmine Garst, NPR News, New York.
Online retailer Amazon reported a boost in quarterly profits, though the company missed revenue estimates, sending its shares lower today. Seattle-based company says for the April through June period, earned $13.5 billion. That's about 20% more than analysts expected, but revenues slightly missed estimates. Crude oil futures prices followed stocks lower amid fears a weakening economy could weigh on demand. Oil down more than 3.5% today, settled at $73.52 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. I'm Jack Spear, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR and the Tiny Desk contest comes from Capital One, offering their premium travel card, VentureX. Capital One is proud to support NPR Music and the Tiny Desk contest. Capital One, what's in your wallet? And the listeners who support this NPR station.
From the New York Times, I'm Sabrina Tavernisi, and this is The Daily. For years, Rupert Murdoch seemed content to let his children battle it out for control of his conservative media empire once he's gone. But as my colleague Jim Rutenberg found out, Murdoch's feelings have now changed. Today, how Murdoch's secret choice touched off an ugly family squabble that could influence how much of the world sees the news. It's Friday, August 2nd. So you have become, Jim, one of the world's leading experts on the Murdoch family, certainly the expert for the New York Times on the Murdoch family. This is, of course, the family that owns Fox News. You've recently uncovered quite an unexpected turn in the tale of this family. Tell us what you found.
Well, I have to say that yes, I've been covering this family for a long time. I thought I'd see it all, and apparently I haven't. The Murdochs have tried to keep a lot of this out of public view, but my reporting partner, Jonathan Mahler, and I got access to a single sealed court document. What we learned is that for many months, in an obscure probate courthouse in Nevada, the Murdoch family had been battling it out for control, not only of their family fortune, but for Rupert Murdoch's huge global media empire, this conservative media juggernaut that's best known for its crown jewel, Fox News. It's classic. So on the one side, you have the patriarch Rupert and his favorite son, Lionel. On the other side is Rupert's remaining 3 adult children, James, Elizabeth, and Prudence. And whichever faction ends up winning is going to have control over what we all know would be this huge media empire that has incredible influence on our politics.
Jim, this sounds familiar. Sounds like one of my favorite shows, the HBO series Succession.
Well, it does. Maybe that's because the family at the heart of that show is clearly based in part, at least, on the Murdochs. But while Succession stars even a 13-year-old girl who had gone missing.
News of the World executives and legal advisors warned in detail of what was happening. Yet Mr. Murdoch said he had never been made aware and he didn't ask.
It's a cataclysmic existential crisis for the company, the biggest crisis in the Murdoch Empire's history. And James is the one in charge and takes the fall. And Lachlan returns to the fold to help his brother cope with the scandal around hacking. And Rupert tasks the two sons now to lead the business together. And you have some tension. The tension, in part, is Fox News and the Trump era.
The America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people.
As Trump rises, Fox really starts moving more and more to the right.
This is a flat-out invasion.
It had always been conservative, of course, from its very first days. But as Trump rises and as Trump becomes the nominee for the Republican Party, and certainly after he wins and moves into the administration, the network begins to parrot some of his more outrageous claims. It's really beyond what we had seen from Fox in all of its history.
The point of mandatory vaccination is to identify the sincere Christians in the ranks, the free thinkers, the men with high testosterone levels, and anyone else who does not love Joe Biden, and make them leave immediately. It's a takeover of the U.S. military.
And in futility, James, who's watching all this in despair, tries to rein it in. But at the end of the day, the ratings are off the charts. It's like record after record. Rupert and Lachlan are thrilled. And after basically losing this fight, James leaves and Lachlan emerges as Rupert's true successor. But there's a catch. Lachlan's control is temporary.
Okay.
Because really what's going on here is that Rupert Murdoch has set up a family trust in which all the family ownership of this global empire rests. It's all in this trust. It's about not only Rupert's billion-dollar fortune, which under the terms of the trust will be split between all of his children equally, but so too will control of the global empire after Rupert Murdoch dies.
Huge power.
Huge power, but shared power. So Lachlan's the successor as long as Rupert's alive. But once Rupert dies, Lachlan's place in the succession is now up for grabs. All 4 children will have an equal claim to succession and equal shares in voting power as to who it will be who will lead them. And here's the thing. That trust is irrevocable. That is legally set in stone, cannot be changed. And the 3 children, James, Elizabeth, and Prudence, started to form their own block. They actually went to their father and brother and said, okay, Lachlan can buy the 3 of us out. Take the trust, take the companies, but it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen, we're told at the time, because he just couldn't come up with that kind of money. I mean, this would be like several $billion. But in the end, the trust stays the same and all the siblings will still have an equal say in it after Rupert's passing. But there's a vestige of this that becomes very important. Over the intervening years, there's increasingly talk that this block could do something more. That when Rupert dies, this block could move to shove Lachlan aside and take over the company.
So instead of running away from the company, selling and getting out, they're actually going in the opposite direction, running toward the company, the power it, potentially presents, and kind of wresting control away from Lachlan, the favored by Rupert, older brother.
Theoretically, the thinking here would be, if we're in it, then we're in it, but we don't want to own it in this form. And again, this is talk around them. There's a lot of speculation, but the view we understand the best is that of James.
Okay.
And as we understood it, James and his sisters apparently are in the same camp. It was never talking about making Fox into MSNBC, certainly, not even CNN. I mean, he understood, and I think they all understand, that this is a right-leaning conservative empire. But the language around James, and when his view was explained to us, it would come through as words like responsibility and ethics and journalism, being grounded in journalism. And so you're looking at what would be a Fox that maybe wouldn't talk about an immigrant invasion. You wouldn't hear doubts about climate change and the human causes. You'd have way less conspiratorial thinking in the opinion sections of Fox, just going to be okay that these 4 children are going to fight it out amongst themselves, and maybe his chosen one loses. I just wondered, is he really going to let that happen? And 2 weeks ago, I got my answer. And the answer was a decided no. He was going to fight back.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Amazon Business, aiming to help save time by offering smart business buying solutions. So there's more time to focus on growing the business and less time doing the admin. More at AmazonBusiness.com. Rigorous reporting told through a human lens. Go deeper into the most important stories of the day with The Daily, an audio series from the New York Times. Distribution of The Daily is made possible by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that inform and inspire, entertain, and engage audiences everywhere.
This is News 88.7.
You can unlock thousands of dollars for Houston Public Media today. When we reach 200 donations by midnight, a group of Affinity Council members will release an additional $35,000 in funding for this station. Your support powers local stories and balanced news for all of Greater Houston. Today is the last day to join the Unlock Challenge and make a difference. Your gift brings us one step closer. Give right now at HoustonPublicMedia.org.
It was a bad business plan on our end. If we were expecting just Irish speakers, we'd be playing in front of the same couple of families in Belfast.
So the director of their biopic made a promise.
This was a film that was primarily for Gaelic Irish speakers.
Decap, plus the latest News Saturday Night Weekend edition from NPR.
Tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock here on News 88.7.
Over control of Rupert Murdoch's media empire. The result could influence how much of the world sees the news. Okay, so Rupert Murdoch decides to make a life. What does he do?
Well, I can't get inside his head, but it's pretty clear that this talk of his 3 children ganging up on his one, the chosen one, and moving him aside and perhaps reorienting the company away from Rupert's vision, I mean, this is not good. But remember, this trust is irrevocable. So what can he do? Well, when you're a billionaire, what you can do is hire a really good lawyer. And his lawyers start what we can tell going through this thing, and they find a loophole. This narrow provision that would allow Rupert to make changes to its structure as long as they're done in good faith and with a singular sole purpose, and that is to benefit its members. What Rupert decides he wants to do is basically disenfranchise the 3, James, Prudence, and Elizabeth, so that Lachlan has sole control.
But that seems to fly in the face of how the trust is structured, right? Like, the changes have to benefit all 4 equally. Here, this seems to be clearly favoring just one of the kids, Lachlan.
It's interesting that you would say that, because in Rupert's view, we understand that this internally was being described as Project Harmony. Okay. And it was Project Harmony because, okay, you could argue that it's Lachlan being raised above all others, but the argument, apparently in Rupert world, Lachlan, well, there's no longer, this is for everybody's good, it's harmony. Lachlan's the guy, no fighting amongst yourselves, we're going to clean that thing up, everyone can be happy and line up behind Lachlan. Well, when Rupert goes to formalize this, he actually does go and
on its face, an uphill battle.
Well, there are a couple arguments he's making. One is that allegiances are constantly changing. Who's friends with who in the family is always shifting. So you can't have them. This is bad for business. We need harmony. We need one person and one person only, and that person is Lachlan. And in the court record we've obtained, this is made very clear, where in laying some of this out, what the Rupert side said was that Rupert, as the founder, knows these companies better than anyone and believes that Lachlan is in the best position to carry on the successful strategy to be the leader of these companies. Now, what's the strategy? We know the strategy. The strategy is that so many of these Murdoch outlets are these right-wing sort of clarions. And so there's a concern that the three would outward the one and change the editorial orientation of the companies, which again would jeopardize the value of the companies. So what does that boil down to?
Keep right.
Dad's doing this for you guys. I'm taking away your power, but you can thank me later. That's basically the argument.
And what's the evidence that that's actually true? I mean, that it would jeopardize the value of the companies?
Well, it's a great question. And just to preface my answer, I just want to be clear, we don't know how much of that is going to be litigated in this court case, but it's a very important and interesting question. And what Rupert Murdoch could point to, and Lachlan Murdoch could point to, is 2020. Election night has happened, and Fox declares that Joe Biden has won the key state of Arizona, which really hurts Trump's ability to claim he's the true winner. And Trump is furious, his base voters are furious, and therefore the Fox audience is furious. And that audience, for a time, flees the network. There's a cratering of ratings, okay? It's a crisis. And so Fox scrambles to get them back. It starts trafficking, its opinion hosts especially, start trafficking in some of the stolen voter conspiracy and having guests on who are talking about it and letting Trump make these arguments that the election was stolen. Now, they do that and they get their audience back. But they wouldn't have been able to, presumably, in this different direction, scramble to the Trump base and give them what they wanted, which is always the Rupert rule, give them what they want.
Okay, so there is something to Rupert's argument, right?
Well, yeah, and especially now, I'm going to say, because the viewers who fled Fox had somewhere else to go. They could go to Newsmax, which is a new right-wing rival to Fox. There was One America News that blanked it out to its right, with plenty happy trafficking in that kind of conspiracy. There were websites, there were podcasts. The Fox News audience has never had more places to go to on its right. So there's a real competitive issue there.
So what did James and his sisters say to that?
Well, again, we don't know the particulars because this whole case is sealed. So there's so much that's happening here in secret, and our access is fairly limited. But we do know what James has said in the past. What James's argument was back when he was running the company with his brother was, sure, you're going to get the short-term rating gains, no doubt. I don't think he ever argued with that. But at what cost? And let's remember what happened after the 2020 election. Yes, Fox regained its ratings footing, flanked out its right-wing competitors, but boy did it come at a cost. As you might remember, there was a voting company called Dominion Voting Systems that was in the center of some of those voting conspiracies. Those voting conspiracies popped out onto Fox's air. They were about this supposed voting machine company switching Trump votes to Biden's votes. The company files a defamation suit, and in the end, Rupert Murdoch is forced to shell out the biggest defamation settlement in known history of almost $800 million. They're facing another lawsuit. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
I mean, it was a huge financial hit for the company and kind of showed how going too far out there in the conspiracy world could cost real-world money, right?
Yeah, and by the way, it didn't end with Dominion. There's another suit still pending by another company, part of the same conspiracy, called Smartmatic. It sued Fox for almost $2.6 billion. These are gigantic sums for any corporation in America, let's face it. But I want to say one thing. From the court papers we've obtained, James and his sisters are making a more narrow argument that boils down to, Dad, you can't do this. This is favoring one over the other, and the trust, as written, very clearly said they all had to be treated equally, and this is certainly not equal.
Okay, so now all of this is in the hands of a court in Nevada.
Yeah, basically, as we understand it, in September, all the drama will play out behind these closed doors, and it will fall to this probate commissioner in Washington County
then it's not, it comes back again, alliances shift. But this time, in that court, it really does feel like maybe this is it. We're gonna get the answer, the series finale.
Well, in the real version of the story, there are never season finales. It's possible. This judge could say, hey, Rupert gets his say here, it's Lachlan, and then Fox News stays Fox News, the empire stays intact, everything goes in its way. Or he says, Rupert can't do this. And then you think you have an answer. Okay, now you have a solid block of the other three. They will wrest this away from Lachlan. They will change Fox News, change the empire. But that just might not be the case. Because all these children, over the course of all these decades I've been covering this family, their alliances are constantly shifting. James and Elizabeth aren't talking. James and Lachlan aren't talking. James and Rupert aren't talking. So we don't even know that after Rupert dies, these three are going to stay in a block. So think about it this way. The fate of the most influential conservative media empire in the entire English-speaking world, and by extension, the politics of the English-speaking world and beyond, all rest on these few siblings finding a way to finally get along.
And good luck with that.
God bless.
Jim, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Jim Rosenberg covers media for the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by Progressive Insurance. On the road and at home, customers can simplify their insurance needs and protect what's important by bundling home and auto with Progressive Insurance. Learn more about Progressive and bundling at progressive.com. For everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day, you're listening to The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times. It is distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily by going to nytimes.com/The Daily. That's it for The Daily. I'm Sabrina Tavernise. See you on Monday.
Tax rates for the ultra-wealthy have plummeted over the past few decades. As financial inequality soars, leaders in Brazil think they might have a solution. Could a global tax on billionaires help solve problems like climate change and poverty? I'm Scott Detrow. That story at All Things Considered from NPR News.
Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, right here on News 88.7. Be sure to tell your smart speaker to play Houston Public Media.
On yesterday's show, Today Explained, reporter Halima Shah wanted to talk about ecstasy.
That's right, because the FDA is currently considering making ecstasy, or MDMA, something that you can use in psychotherapy for PTSD. A very old idea that was floated as early as the 80s.
But then the DEA got involved and they were like, no.
Yeah, and now in 2024, it seems like there's a sea change happening because conservatives in Congress, as well as Fox News hosts, are throwing their support behind MDMA-assisted therapy.
I will scream it from the mountaintops. People should have access to this treatment.
And a lot of it is because of the testimony of veterans who say that this helped heal their PTSD.
And you spoke to some veterans.
I did, and that's coming up on Today Explained.
Keep right and then exit right.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. Vice President Kamala Harris makes history securing enough votes to become the Democratic Party's presumptive presidential nominee. NPR's Windsor Johnson tells us how Harris received the required number of delegates during an ongoing virtual roll call vote ahead of the DNC convention later this month.
She moved quickly to secure key endorsements and delegate pledges shortly after President Biden dropped out of the race last month. The nomination comes just days before Harris is expected to appear alongside her yet-to-be-announced running mate in Philadelphia and 3 weeks before delegates gather in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. Kamala Harris is now the first black woman and the first person of South Asian heritage to be the presidential nominee of a major political party.
NPR's Windsor Johnston Harris is expected to name a running mate early next week as her campaign prepares for the Democratic National Convention that begins in Chicago, August 19th. The acting Secret Service director says his agency's performance at the Pennsylvania Trump rally last month was a mission failure that led to an attempt on the former president's life. During a news conference today, Ronald Rowe said agents didn't have access to local radio transmissions that could have been crucial to stopping the assassination attempt.
The Secret Service's Office of Professional Responsibility is currently conducting a mission assurance review.
And then turn right.
As I stated, I am not waiting for the completion of those reports, and I've directed the Secret Service to take immediate steps to ensure our protectees are indeed safe.
Rowe says the Secret Service will now have counter snipers at all presidential events. The gunman was killed after wounding 2 people and killing another. On Wall Street, stocks finished sharply lower today. This is NPR. The Paris Olympics are approaching the midway point as the action shifts from swimming and gymnastics to track and field this weekend. The U.S. is heavily favored in some of the marquee races, as we hear from NPR's Brian Mann.
The American stars in the first half of these summer games were gymnast Simone Biles and swimmer Katie Ledecky. Now the spotlight and the hunt for gold medals, they're shifting to the track and field venue here, Paris's enormous Stade de France. American sprinters, including Sha'Carri Richardson and Noah Lyles, are strong favorites in their events. Another runner to watch is Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist who hits these games after beating her own world record in June in the women's 400-meter hurdles. The schedule is packed with running sports, high jumps, shot put, and other events. Traditionally, the U.S. cleans up on medals during this stretch of Olympic competition. Away from the track, there's still a lot more action, from basketball to canoe racing to golf. Brian Mann, NPR News, Paris.
California-based chipmaker Intel Corporation says it's cutting 15% of its workforce, or 15,000 jobs. The majority of the layoffs will happen this year as Intel tries to revive its business and compete with rivals